Thank you for tuning in to another exciting episode of the Hush No More podcast, where former WNBA player Leslie Johnson interviews former pro athletes about their successes and their difficulties when they transitioned after professional sports.
All right. Let me take a good look at you.
How you doing?
Nice to meet you.
Same here.
Nice to meet you. Very nice to
Yes.
meet you.
Yeah, same here.
All right. I'm ready to begin if you are.
I am ready.
All right. Let's do it. Thank you to everyone who has tuned in today to watch Hush No More. We have here a very, very special guest. His name is Mr. Harold Blackmon, and he is a former NFL player who once played for the Seattle Seahawks. Harold, thank you for coming on today.
Thank you, Leslie.
Hey, Harold, I want you to introduce yourself to all our viewers who don't know who you are. Just let them know what you're about, what you have going on.
Okay. Well, I'll start with I'm really, from my standpoint, I'm just an average guy. Spent a couple years in the National Football League, but those couple years really taught me a lot. Not only was that my first time being away from home, because me being from Chicago, I graduated from Northwestern University. So going out to the Pacific West Coast was my first time being away from home, but also just having an opportunity to observe the lifestyle and just the mindset. And it was just so foreign to me. So that from an NFL standpoint, I learned a lot. But as I mentioned earlier, I'm from Chicago, born and raised, graduated from Northwestern University. And from there, we've done a million things. But I guess the longest thing that I've done was I was a high school head football coach here in the Chicago area. And I was fortunate enough to be part of a coaching staff where we took a team from 1-8 to perennial deep playoff runs teams. We never won state, but we got close a couple times, and a lot of
Yeah.
people say that was pretty impressive from where they were before myself and my staff took over. Since then, I've taken those skills and parlayed them into just starting my own business. So currently, I run a construction management firm. We focus on residential and commercial remodeling here in the Chicago area. And those same leadership skills I learned as a captain on the football team and also through through being a head football coach. Now I'm using those same skills in terms of like relating to my project managers, trying to motivate my contractors, trying to get my subcontractors on the same page. So it all translates. So that's uh that's pretty much me in a nutshell.
All right. Well, I definitely want to hear a little bit more about Chicago. I want to hear about your upbringing. I want to hear, give me the details. I want to know. I want to know what was it like growing up in Chicago because you hear all of these things on the news. And a lot of people don't understand areas, they don't understand what's going on. Okay, here we go. Because a lot of people are don't understand the dimensions of Chicago. And we just so happen to have a Chicago backdrop, is what you're looking at. That's
I
the
like it.
Chicago skyline.
I
We
like it. I
put
like it.
that up just for you today,
I love
by
it.
the way. I'll actually have to repent because that was just a little but anyway, it just sounded good, so I thought I'd throw it in. But anyway, will you tell everybody a little bit more about Chicago? Like, just because again, people a lot of times they get their information from the news, what they see, what
Mhm.
they hear. Another Chicago had 30 shootings over the weekend.
Right.
Did you experience that when you were growing up?
Yeah, unfortunately I did. But Chicago is my home, so it's what I know. And I know Chicago is not the most violent city, statistically speaking. But at the same time, we do have a lot of problems. Our mayor, she's I think the first time in decades, she's the first one-term mayor. She didn't even get voted into a runoff.
I saw
It's
that.
the city. I live on the south side, so the way Chicago is, it's really broken up into sections. So you have the south side, you have the north side, and you have the west side. And then you have what we call over east, right? But and that's just an extension of the south side. The south side is really where you're gonna have more of your urban neighborhoods, more um, underrepresented neighborhoods, and the same with the west side. And then the north side is probably where the tourists would be, where you're in downtown and don't go south, go north.
Okay.
Being from Chicago, I do feel like it does have sort of a bad reputation, but at the same time, it's tough for me to say that. From the standpoint, this summer my son was home from college and he was hanging out at a park on the south side, and he's very sheltered, by the way, very
Mm.
sheltered. And he was visiting a friend. They went to play some basketball, and he says, some shots just rang out. And he says, I
Mm.
mean, he was running for his life, and he was probably a mile away from that incident by the time he started running. And
Mhm.
he like hasn't gone out since, other than just going to college. He really doesn't go out because that's something he's not really experienced.
And did
So
you see some of that? Were you ever a part of, hearing those gunshots ring?
we're on the south side. We hear them all the time. But yeah, growing
But
up,
growing up,
yeah, well, I grew up in the Chicago housing project. So for those of you out there who are from Chicago, I'm from the Ida B. Wells housing projects. And growing up in Ida B. Wells, yeah, we've seen a lot of things. I've seen, standing outside of my school, I've seen shootouts, and you become desensitized to it. So I'll give you a quick story about just
yeah.
Chicago. And so I volunteered. I helped coach. I helped the buddy coach here on the South Side at an all male school. It's located right in the middle of the city. And over the course of the 3 months that I was volunteer coaching, there were two people who were shot and killed. And this
Mm.
is right next to the school. There were at least two incidents where there was so much shooting the kids couldn't go to the practice field.
Wow.
And there was one incident where we were in the middle of practice and some shots rang out and no one budged. It's like we continue practice. So after one of the one after one shooting where the guy, we found out he lost his life, unfortunately, I had to take the time to address the kids and say this is not normal.
Yeah.
Like a lot of other places, and I would imagine it to be not dissimilar from other inner city issues, whether it's Texas, whether it's Fort Wayne maybe, or something
Mhm.
like that. But I would imagine we go through the same problem. Chicago just really
Yeah.
gets a rap for it in the media, but again, it's not natural. And for all of
Yes.
those kids out there in those areas, I just don't want us to be desensitized to it. And
That's a great point.
I feel that I was desensitized to it up until I went to college. And just another kind of quick story about that. So I go to college, my first year in college.
Mhm.
I'm at Northwestern University, which is a world apart from being on the south side of Chicago. And so I'm there after the first semester. I'm home for the winter, right? So we go to our gym where I've grown up. I've gone there my entire life. All of a sudden, this gym becomes extremely small to me when I walk in.
Mhm.
And then I look around and I realize there's only one exit. I said, if someone comes in here and starts shooting, there's no way out, right? So I'm paranoid, right?
Yeah.
So
Of
then my,
course.
my cousin and I, we leave the gym, and a guy we grew up with, he's driving by. He randomly asked me, "Hey, have you seen a guy we grew up with? Have you seen this guy?" I says, "No, I'm in college. I don't even hang out anymore." He looks, says, "Okay." So I'm walking with my cousin. My cousin says, "Hey, he's actually looking for that guy, and he was trying to see if you still hung with him." A few weeks later, he found that guy and he shot him up. So I
Mm.
get back to school and I'm speaking with my guidance counselor, and I tell her, I say, I don't know what it is, but it's gotten worse around, my neighborhood. It's gotten worse.
Yeah.
And she
Yeah.
said something to me that I'll never forget. She said, "No, your neighborhood hasn't changed in a few months that you left." She said, you've changed. She said, your eyes have seen different things. You lay down in an environment where you're not threatened. So when you go back home, it's a totally different world to you. So
Mhm.
again, I was desensitized to it until I went to college. And I feel like that's when my eyes started to open that, you know what, this is not the real world, or this is not the way it should be.
Is that what made you want to play football, or was it something else? Because I really have to know what started it all.
You know, it's football chose me, honestly.
Okay,
I
I like that.
Yeah, football chose me. I was when growing up in the parks in the Chicago Park District,
Yeah.
we played every sport under the sun. Softball, volleyball, basketball. Track was our favorite sport. And my sixth grade year, I decided to go out for football, and it's just too rough of a sport for me. I mean, it was just too rough. I couldn't handle it. Like all these
I can't
guys,
wait to hear how you evolved.
you
So you
know,
started off too much. So how did we get here?
right, right. So I'm looking at these guys just kind of ramming each other, and like, oh my God, I do not like this at all.
I'm not trying to get hurt. I
Right.
get it.
So I conveniently like lost my practice pants, so that gave me a reason to not show
Hmm.
back up. But my seventh grade year, my coach, who at that time was like a father to me, he
Hmm.
says, Harold, you cannot come back to the park. You can't play any other sports unless you play football.
And you said
So
what?
I, I mean, I had to do it. But that sixth grade year, a little backstory on that. I so I go out. I'm on a football field. I'm getting beat up every single day. So we have our first scrimmage, and I'm on the sideline. So the first quarter go by. I'm like, okay, I'll maybe get in second quarter. Second quarter go by. By the time we hit the fourth quarter, I'm literally at the water fountain just playing around, not even interested in the game anymore, right? So it was at that point I realized I didn't even have a position. I didn't have a position, So so seventh grade comes around. I'm like, well, I didn't have a position last year before I quit. So you're gonna play quarterback. All right, I'm gonna play quarterback, right? So I was the backup quarterback, and that
Hmm.
summer, and the starter was really good too. And that summer, the starter, he quit. He just didn't want to do it anymore. And they looked at me and said, "Are you ready to be the starting quarterback?" I said, "Well, why not?" And it just took off from there. I fell in love with it from there. So that's how
So
I
you
ended up
fell
in.
in love as a quarterback.
I fell in love as a quarterback. Yep.
So when did the change switch happen? What year was that?
So I
When
played
did they
quarter.
change your position?
I played quarterback all through high school, and when I got to college, they switched me over to defensive back.
There's a lot of difference between a quarterback and a defensive back. And you started off, I was listening to you really well. You started off, you didn't want to get hit. You didn't
No,
want to get hurt.
no.
So now you're primarily getting hit and you're doing the hitting.
Well, now we do
So
the
how did
hitting.
you evolve?
Yeah. So now we're doing the hitting, and I play corners. We're not physical,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it's for me. It was not a tough transition. Now, when I first got to college
Mhm.
and I moved over to defensive back, I had not played defense since grade school, so I had to learn how to tackle and never played defensive back. So my teammates would laugh at me because every time I try to like make a play, I would slip and fall. And they would say, because your head is too big for your body. So therefore you don't have any balance, right?
Oh, I know. I know a locker room talk.
you know,
I understand locker room talk. The jokes I can tell you and the jokes I told. Hey, I own it. I own it. It was part, sports culture. So that's what's up.
oh, believe me, I give it, but I'm able to take it. So
That's
I
right. Because I know you dished it.
oh yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I dished it. So what happened is my first year playing defensive back, I was absolutely terrible. And this is a theme in my life. Like it definitely takes me a long time to catch on to something, and then I figure out how to master it once I catch on to it.
Yeah.
So I was terrible that first year, and people would tease me and whatnot. But what I did was, in between teasing, they would always tell me, well, you're not doing this, you're not doing that. I would
Hmm.
I would listen. I would listen to what they were saying in the middle, in between laughing. I said, oh, okay, that's what I'm not doing right. And then our best player, I would literally I just took on his entire persona. I say, if he can do it, I can do it. And I would just pretend to be him. Or like when I played the scout team, I would always want to be their best player. Like I was Charles Woodson on when we were playing Michigan.
The dream. You started
So
dreaming.
you start dreaming and you start thinking and feeling like you can do what they do. And
Absolutely.
it evolved, and I ended up being a 4-year starter. I still hold multiple records at the school and was team captain on the last Big Ten championship team. So, it all worked out. And for what I call a chubby kid from the South Side of Chicago, I'll take it.
Hey, let me high five you because I call myself the chubby kid from Fort Wayne, and I was dubbed Baby Barkley because of my stockiness and the way that I played strong using the big body that I had. So I had to learn how to embrace my image.
Right.
And I have had my share of success because I did. And that's going to be another episode where we're going to start talking about the body imaging because let me tell you, I went through it, especially as a woman.
As a woman.
As a woman. But what I really want to get into, I love the fact that you brought up the fact that you listen. And these days, when we were growing up, we always heard our parents say, y'all don't listen. When we was growing up, we had to listen because of this. And it almost feels like it's getting worse, but maybe it's not. Maybe we were as bad. But to me, it's like there's so many distractions with the cell phone and social media. And then it just feels like kids just aren't paying attention. So when you say you listen, I accept that as you listen to constructive criticism as opposed to negativity. Would you expand on that?
I listen to all criticism. Whether you were laughing at me, whether you were trying to get me better, I listened to it all and I absorbed it. In terms of, kids today, I have a son, he's 21. So the people who complain about kids today, I say, we're the parents of the kids.
Thank you.
I mean, at
Absolutely.
the end of the day,
it's a great,
we developed
that's
them,
true.
right? So, but yeah, I've always been like that. Like even how I run my company.
I want to hear about envy. I want to talk about jealousy. When did you begin to experience jealousy and envy? There's some things I just want to hear from you because part of this interviewing, I'm just like, I'm learning too. It's like, was it just me? or is it just part of sports culture? Because I really bring that point up because I mentor a lot of kids. And the number one thing I listen to is them complain how this teammate of theirs did this. It feels like the coach just don't like me. I want to hear from you exactly what did you go through, and just tell the kids that are listening how they should handle jealousy and envy.
I don't think I've ever experienced a lot of jealousy and envy. And I remember being in the NFL, and I had a teammate come to me and he says, Harold, you're too good to not be a starter. You need to go somewhere else and start. And that kind of affects you. Or I had a scout who says you should be starting out there at defensive back, but yet I'm a special teamer, practice squad kind of guy. But that's the NFL. Like the difference between a practice squad player and a star player is not a big difference, right? So we were playing the Dallas Cowboys, and a guy I grew up with, he was on the Dallas Cowboys, and pregame we spoke, and he was not a very good player. And I asked him, how are you doing? And he says, oh, just working hard, but the coach doesn't like me. It was then and there, I said, I would never say the coach doesn't like me as a result of me not playing, right? So I could make an argument for like my time in the league being short because I did not have a great relationship with my head coach. But at the end of the day, it is what it is. Like all you can do is what you can do and control what you can control. So when people say the coach don't like me, that's an excuse. And that, to me, that gives a person a reason not to work hard. So
I
you
want to do a little pushback on that
know, here,
point.
yep.
We in sports, all you have to do is go to an AAU game,
Hmm.
and sometimes we do hear coaches just berating kids. And if we're being honest, to all the IU fans that are listening in, Bobby Knight was doing it
Mm,
for decades.
mm, right.
And so, yes, and that's why I really want to open up the conversation on these type of topics, because I have seen verbal abuse from
Hmm.
coaches. I
Hmm.
know many people don't like to dub it as that because there is
Hmm.
such a thin line. Like
Hmm.
I've had the coaches that yell and because they're just trying to get the most from you.
Right.
But I've also seen coaches call players names that, my goodness, that
Hmm.
is abridged way too far. And
Hmm.
so that kid will sometimes come home and they will internalize that. And I've seen kids almost to the place of just breaking because they feel like, again, that the coach doesn't like them.
Right.
But I think that where we have to continue to have discussions is the fact that some coaches, it's totally not personal,
Right.
but it's just their coaching style, trying to
Right.
get the most from that player, or maybe that they see the most from that kid and they're just trying to pull it out. But their way that they communicate
Right.
is resonating to that kid in a way that they feel picked on,
Right.
they feel
Right.
singled out. And
Right.
so um, I'm glad to, well, let me just ask you.
Hmm.
I mean, were you ever yelled at? You didn't see the envy and the jealousy, but and I know where you're probably gonna go. You're gonna probably say, yeah, but I understood it because I was that type of player. Like I could get yelled at, like I accepted it. And matter of fact, most of the coaches that yelled at me were a lot of the coaches I respected the most. But I did want to touch on that because
Right.
I know that there are people who are just truly trying to understand what is the line,
So, okay,
or where is the line.
right. Well, first and foremost, I never condone that type of coaching style. I never liked that type of coaching style, and I've never been that type of coach where you feel it's okay to break a kid down and 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 really have them, stretch them, mentally in terms of does he like me, does he not like me? We talk about a guy like Bobby Knight. I like to see his track record in terms of what he did for players after they were done playing for him. What was the result then? I had a coach like
Yes.
that in college. He was very, very tough, and we did not get along at all. So it's kind of to your point, how do I deal with a coach yelling at me? Honestly, most of my career I yelled back, but I was in a position where I could do that, and I don't condone that at all.
Mm-hmm.
But we had a coach, and he was really, really tough on us, and I mean, I would give it back to him where we had a meeting like player to coach, and it was like, all right, we'll just agree to disagree. But I don't like how you're running the team. You
Did
don't
you
like how I'm
fear
pushing back.
that did you fear the tag of the word uncoachable?
I'm sure I got that tag. I'm sure I got it. But at the end of the day, it was a decision I had to make. And when I was in the NFL, I remember being yelled at and my position coach coming to me saying, Harold, don't talk back to the head coach. He's a big popular head coach and whatnot. And I'm sure that played a lot in terms of like kind of my path. So no, I'm not going to say I understood it. I never understood it. I never reacted well to the coach who yells and tries to lead by fear. No, you're going to get, if I don't feel you're respecting me, I'm not going to give you respect back. So to your point, for me as a head coach, I've always
Mhm.
felt like every single kid is an individual. There's no one blanket way to coach a full team of individuals. And some coaches, all they know is that one style, and they're just not flexible enough to do it. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I mean, I would venture to bet that Mike Krzyzewski is probably just as bad as Bobby Knight. You know, I like to hear what
Right.
those players have to say, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
but I probably couldn't play
But
for
we see their
Krzyzewski.
success. We see their success. Um,
Right.
I think it's very interesting because one thing I've said a lot to people, I said, listen, there are only two professional positions where people say you're doing a wonderful job if you're screaming and you're yelling and you're getting on people.
Right.
And that is in the military and in sports. And
Yeah.
so I bring that up because I have also seen that the emotional damage that can happen. I will be the first one to say it doesn't happen a lot
Hmm.
from the players that I've spoken to, but it happens enough
Hmm.
where I've seen kids who quit the sport very early on. I've
Hmm.
seen college athletes who just don't want to go to practice. They really just rather just turn in their helmet or just stop playing ball.
A crossroads in probably 2016. I enjoy coaching, but I felt that I had more to offer, and I didn't want to coach in college, and I didn't want to coach in the NFL. I just don't
Yeah,
want to. I like football, but I
yeah,
didn't want to basically sacrifice my best years in terms of life sitting behind the desk calling myself a coach. I just feel there's much more to life than sport.
bless your
So
heart. Yeah,
while I do love being around the kids and coaching and motivating,
yeah,
I just had to make a decision that was best for me. And
got
that
you.
was to take these skills and apply them in more like corporate in terms of building my own company. So it was more so just me stretching my legs, testing my boundaries, and,
Hmm.
and as a former athlete, you're always going to be a competitor. So
Yeah.
I want to see if I can compete in this space.
So what I want to do is come back to talking to you about your company.
Hmm.
But being that you're a former NFL player, I want to hear from you. What emotions came over you the
Hmm.
moment you learned you were going to the NFL?
So I told you before, my thought process is probably counter to a lot of people, right? Oh, yeah. When I was drafted, it's 7 rounds in the NFL draft when I was drafted, which is still 7 rounds, but it was over the course of 2 days. So I thought I would go in the third or fourth round. Third round comes and goes on day one. I'm not drafted. On day two, I get a call from a team. Hey, we're going to draft you in the fourth round. That pick came and went, didn't happen. So now my girlfriend at the time, wife now, is constantly calling me. What's going on? What's going on? What's going on? So I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what's happening. So like when you talk about uncoachable, maybe something was said about me. I don't know. But so seventh round, um, I feel like it was the guy who was like cleaning up the stage called me. It's like, Harold, we think we're gonna draft you to Seattle. It was real dry. It was like real dry. like
See, this is why I love this because see, you have gone completely left whatever I had in mind. I just knew you was gonna start crying. You was like, "Oh my God, it was just such a drink of true. It was the moment I've been waiting for." But the audience needs to hear that
right,
because we
right.
have so many different experiences. You don't even want to hear mine because you had to get out the Kleenex. I mean, I was just on in the driveway on the ground.
Yeah. Oh wow.
T, come get her, come get her, come get her, come get her,
Wow.
because she just won't stop crying. Okay, okay, I know you're happy, but
Right,
get it
right,
together because you got a plane to board. But I'm
right.
listening to you, and you just like, well,
Oh
sounds like the
man.
guy in the back. The
It
guy in
was
the back let me know I was gonna be. So let's
it
hear
was it was like great because at that point, like I don't do parties or anything like that. So on that Sunday, which was the last day of the draft, I'm sitting in my apartment by myself and just looking at ESPN as the names go by. Like, all right, yeah, all right.
hurt,
So, you know,
hurt. I know
it's
you was
just like,
hurt.
it's just kind of like, it's like, I'm over this, right? So
Hmm.
the guy from Seattle calls. He's like, hey, Harold, yeah, we think we're going to draft you. So I'm like, okay. So he's like, okay, turn your television on. Okay. You see your name. He's like, okay. Then they call me and give me whatever travel accommodations, blah, blah, blah. I think I went out and played basketball that day. It was just like whatever. Like I had just gotten drafted, no draft party, none of that. Just went out, played some basketball. I was like, hey, I'll get out there for camp, for mini camp, and start my career. But at the end of the day, like you talk about with Hush No More and really being role models for the youth going through it, I would say I maybe didn't handle it in the most mature way. Right. So I'm not saying, given my story, saying it was the best way. At the time, 22, 23-year me, now that I'm older, there's a lot of things I feel I didn't handle the
Do
best.
you think that you would have had a more like an extended career had your attitude been
Right.
different, or let's just say it, had you kissed the ring of the right people? Do you feel like your career would have lasted longer?
I do. But at the same time, when I was there, my wife had given birth to our one and only son. She came to Seattle my second year. She was dealing with some postpartum issues, so she had to go back. And I was miserable. And the money was never the motivator. And at that point, that would have been the only thing that motivated me, would have been money, because I, like I said, I may be a little different, but the lifestyle wasn't something it just wasn't me. So a different approach would have had extended my career, yes. But at the same time, I don't have any regrets on how everything played out. You just don't know, especially in the NFL, what the next season, what the next play is going to bring you. So I'm here for a reason, and
Yeah.
I can't argue with that.
I know that you told me that you got injured. Do you feel like that was a pivotal point that maybe the team didn't value you as much because you couldn't perform? So did that have something, do you feel like that had a lot to do with why they just let you go because you was not physically able?
Mhm. Well, I never had any major injuries. I just had a strained hamstring. That's about the worst thing I had.
Well, you
But
know what? Why don't you tell your story? I don't want to tell it for you because you mess it up. Uh, Tell the audience,
hmm
you were talking about physical therapy,
hmm
about
no,
you were supposed to go,
yeah,
and let's talk about you getting waived or
right,
them not picking you back up.
yeah,
I
well,
want you to share with everyone
right.
your go through at that time.
So this was going into my third season. It was the first preseason game. I went out there for a play, and I just kind of strained my hamstring. So I wasn't able to play that day. And I've never had a serious injury. Whereas I missed playing time. So, I've had a torn rotator cuff and things like that, but nothing that would keep me off the field. So I had
Yeah.
just a strain, my hamstring. So with that being said, I'm not familiar with going to um, the training room after games because I'm pretty much, like I told you, I was all about self-preservation. But so the next day after the game, maybe a day or two, the trainer he approaches me and says, "Why didn't you come to therapy if you weren't able to play in the game?" I says, "Oh, it was a strained hamstring. Like it
Yeah.
happens, right?" So he says, "So like I said, I'm giving you these stories, but I'm not necessarily proud of them." So he says, "Well,
I want it how it happened.
right." So
Okay.
he's
Let's not put a band-aid on absolutely nothing.
all right.
Tell it.
So he says, "Well, Harold, the policy is to come to the training room if you cannot play in the game and to get therapy." I said, I don't know your policy. And he says, "Well, that's the policy." So I says, "Well, what are you guys gonna do? Cut me? Because that's gonna happen anyway." Like I told you, I'm very analytical. So I knew I was
Yeah.
outside looking in anyway. But what are you gonna do? Cut me? You're gonna do that anyway, right?
And you expressed that to him. What are you
Yeah.
gonna do? Cut me?
Yeah.
And so he would have told the coach
Oh yeah,
directly.
I'm sure.
Okay,
I'm
well
sure.
go ahead, let's go.
So I go to therapy. Yeah, I know. I don't advocate this. I do
How old
not
are
advocate.
you? Let me
Probably
see.
23,
I just
right?
yeah, well, yeah.
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah.
I
So I
get it. I
don't
mean, yeah.
Yeah, I don't advocate it. Believe me, it cause you more trouble than good. So
So
I
you
go,
tell the trainer, the
Yeah, I told the
therapist.
trainer that, right? So then I
Yeah.
go, so we go out to the field. I'm clear. So I go do the therapy or whatever. I'm clear to come back to practice. I'm 100%. It was like it was just a tweak. And the assistant DB coach comes to me and he says, Harold, so today what we're going to have you do in practice is you're going to go through the drills, all non-contact, but we're not going to put you in any contact drills, right? I was like, okay, that's fine. So then I walked over to my teammates and just made sure I had all of their phone numbers because I knew I would not be there 24 hours later. So I knew that by me not participating in any contact drills, they were getting me on camera for non-contact drills. So there would not be an
Mm.
injury settlement when they cut me.
Mm.
So I stood there and I said, as soon as I walk out here in back paddle, I'm headed back to Chicago. Do I
Mm.
do I pretend like I can't do it and stay longer, or do I go out here and back pedal number one? You know, you're getting a call the next day. I said, I'm ready to go home. Yeah.
I, you know, that part,
Hmm.
you know, it's it's mind-boggling
Hmm.
to hear a player say, knowing how we've dreamed since we were kids to play in the professional leagues.
Hmm.
And here you are, you made it. Your dreams come true. And you just said out loud that you were ready to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you get there? What you're gonna have to dive deeper because it just shocks
Right.
the conscious even of me. And I play and I do get it. Please believe me. I could tell you
Hmm.
some stories where I totally understand
Hmm.
why some players have chosen to bow out. We recently had an NBA player who 23 years old.
Hmm.
He says, I'm done.
Right.
He still had like $1 million left on it. He's like, no, just the pressure of it all. And uh, I just, the way that things are going, I just don't want it. But
Right.
I want to hear from you. Like, you've got to go harder for me
Hmm.
because I know you're going to, this is the part where kids, all they do is watch the NFL
Hmm.
and they want to ball out. And I've got you here saying, well, I was just never kind of guy that you want to ball out or, go to clubs and do all these things.
Right.
So they really need to hear that because there's going to be some kids that's listening. You're basically telling them right now, you don't have to be the guy that's wilding out on the
Hmm.
team. You can
Hmm.
actually be unique and be who you are
Right.
and still get there. But I've got to get you to expand
Hmm.
on what made you just ready to go.
So, you know, I would say as I've gotten older, I've taken time to assess myself. And one thing that I found out about myself is that I'm a competitor, but I'm a conqueror by nature. And
Mm,
when I get to the pinnacle or close to the pinnacle of something, I look for the next challenge. So whether it's being the first person to go to college, whether it's being a starter in college, whether it's being in the NFL, it was like, okay, I knew I was going to the NFL early on. And but once I got there, it was never the big dream. It was just part of the plan, right? So once I was there, I started to get into other things. So I started to do a little real estate investing, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, wow, that's very interesting, right? So now, entrepreneurship and things of that nature. So then I started to say, I want to conquer that avenue. And I've never quit anything in my life, right? But the joy or the euphoria slowly wears down as I hit milestones. So being an NFL player, that was my milestone. I hit it. I knew what it was like. It's for those people where it's their dream and they love it, chase it. chase it until you cannot chase it anymore, right? You owe yourself that. But for those who feel like they want options or they're bigger than that sport, then you owe it to yourself to make sure you position yourself to transition whenever you get that phone call. So from my perspective, like I said, it wasn't necessarily the paycheck that I was looking for. It was the experience, and I had that experience, and it was time for me to move on. So that's pretty much what
Where
went into that decision.
your wife,
Hmm.
you let the audience know, when did you meet your wife?
Oh man, we met in high school. I was a senior, she was a junior. So 90, 95, 95.
It's 2023.
Yep,
So you've been with the same woman since 1995,
95.
and you were playing in the league in the years of.
Like 2001 and like to the camp of '03, something like that. Yep.
So how much went into your thinking of just saying, you know what, regardless, I'm happy. I have someone I love. Um, did that feed any into your thinking of why you was, I'm gonna be good regardless if I play in the
Mhm.
NFL or not because I'm happy, I'm in love. Did the relationship side have anything to do with it?
A lot. So when I was going through it, my jeez, going into my third year, I was just kind of fed up with everything, with it, with the travel, with just everything. Um, and so going into my third year, I remember being at camp, and I remember that summer just not wanting to work out, just not motivated to do anything. So I get to camp, and remember my wife, she stayed back in Chicago,
Okay.
and we're on the phone all the time, all the time. And I told her, I said, I just don't want to be here. And she said, whenever you're ready to come home, come home. That simple, you know.
I gotta jump in. I gotta jump in because I can hear some of my peeps
Hmm. Hmm.
getting mad right now.
Oh wow,
They're
okay,
whispering in my ear. I hear them coming through. They're
right,
yelling at me. They
right,
said, get them,
right.
lads, get
Let's
them."
do it. Right.
Why? You would you let a woman influence your thinking as a professional? Tell her, hey, wait, put her work. I mean, you have guys out here who's, they just don't think that we should ever even allow their woman to have any say in what's going on in their career. But you're a gentleman who's been married for all these years. You're telling me you had no regrets
Right.
on the offer that the woman you was in love with gave you. Like,
Well,
hey boo, if you're tired, come home. I'm here for
right,
you.
right.
Give us some balance on that.
Well, I give you the backstory. When my wife and I met, I was a senior in high school, and before we started officially dating, I told her, I said, before we start dating, I want you to let you know I'm already married. She says, what do you mean? I said, I'm married to school, I'm married to sports. Right.
Wow.
So
Hmm.
I said, if you force me to make a decision between you and my career, is no decision. She says, I
Okay.
understand that. Right. So from that day until now, we don't ever complain about, hey, you have to go play in this game or you have to work this many hours or you have to do that. We understand that's not what it is. And we have a great work-life balance. And
Hmm.
again, that's my best friend in the world. So when I told her I was sick of being there, she was supporting whatever decision I made. If I told her I love it here, I'm never coming, she's like, all right, well, we'll make it work long distance. But the fact that I wanted to be a father first and I couldn't
Mm.
do both because what she was going through, she needed her family. She needed that support. I couldn't give her that support where I was. I had to be a father first. And it just weighed heavy on me. And it was like just being tired of being out there, wondering what my son's up to. They were there with me for my second season, and now they're back home. And she's tying up all the loose ends for us in Chicago, but it just wasn't the same. Like we literally are best friends. So it's so yeah, it wasn't anything that she said come home. No, she is tough as they come. She's like, nah, we'll make it work. But for me, it just wasn't, the trade-off wasn't worth it.
Wow. So you was a man who you just loved your woman. You put your woman first and your children first, your child first at that time. And that's that part. That's that
Mhm.
part for me. That actually does it for me. There, but it's so interesting because we have to have these conversations
Right.
because some people would say, "Oh, absolutely not. The
Mm,
family, if they love you, they'll be waiting for you. You should have got that out of your head. Somebody should have came along and told you to just make that fall back." But you said no. I I wanted to commit to love and my responsibility,
mhm.
and that was something you obviously could live with, and you chose that over the
Right.
career happiness. I
Yeah.
respect you, brother. I respect you for it. I do. I
Right.
respect you.
Right.
um Again, I'm sure there's segments of the population who would said, "Man, but you know what? Maybe they don't know love like you know love. Maybe they don't have the woman that you got." So that's that part where you stand up and you say, "You know what? I got a good thing going on, and it kept me,
Right.
and I respect you for it." I
Yeah. And
do have to hear. Go ahead.
go
Go
ahead. Go
ahead.
ahead. No, I was just saying
Well,
it
I'm
wasn't
ready to
any.
get ratchet though. I'm ready to get ratchet.
Okay. I'm here for that. But
I'm ready to get ratchet. I'm ready to say, what woman try to jump in? Did you ever have any issues with that or challenges to the relationship? Did people they see you had this great thing, you was in love and all was good, and knowing, did you ever have any women try to challenge that?
no, see, this is a part. Like I don't go out. I don't.
There you go.
I don't go out. So when we first got to Seattle, we went out to a couple clubs, and I would talk. Like I talked to a girl for one of my buddies who's shy or something like that. But it's really funny because so I went to Northwestern. My wife's a year younger than I am, and then she ended up going to Loyola. And I lived in Rogers Park, which is where Loyola is. So it was like we were literally 10 minutes away from each other in college. And my wife is not jealous at all. Like she's never been a jealous type, and I'm not jealous at all. She has guy friends. I don't have any friends now, but I had female friends. But it was never anything where like I don't know. It's just real weird. Like people who knew me knew her, and even when we were in Seattle, like the guys would go out. So it's funny. The guys would go out, and I would just laugh. You're in the NFL, right? But yet these guys come to the facilities and they're fighting over the same girls. Like how's this like it's literally like a little pool. So you go to you go to the hotels wherever you are, you see the same girls. All right, I saw her from this and that. So it's never been like, I don't know. Like I said, I maybe I'm just like counter in terms of my thoughts and how I am with life, but
Extremely mature. We'll
I've
say it
always
that
been
way.
I've always been an old soul. Growing up, my mom and pops, they never graduated high school and they had me young. So I've always had to be like the voice of reason for my parents coming up. So I think it just carried over to my personality in terms of like just try your best to do the right thing. And don't get me wrong, I've made mistakes in my life, but I always try to just do the right things.
Yeah, that's what's up. So, what happened next?
Hmm.
They let you go.
Hmm.
Basically, you knew it was coming.
Hmm.
You said you
Hmm.
got all your boys' contact list,
Hmm.
and you went home.
Yep.
So, what happened next? What was the first thing you said? Okay, I'm going to do what?
I'm going to be a real estate investor. That was the next thing. And one of my close friends, when I was playing, I would fund the deals and he would kind of manage the projects or whatever. And um, as we were doing it, we were running up into that first bubble, or
Hmm.
in real estate. And I was like, let's reinvest, reinvest, reinvest. And he was like, no, I need to take my money, do this. Long story short, ran out of money. Ran out of money. I'm licensed as a real estate broker, but it's not from that standpoint. It was a struggle. I mean, it was a struggle for my wife and I for years. And I mean, we talk about being a former athlete and that transition. That transition was very difficult. And that was the closest we've ever come to divorce in all of our time. And I told you I had to look inside, and that's when I said analyze myself and say, what is the cause of this friction between you and your wife?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I had to realize it was me, right? Because that was all I was known as, was a football player, and I had lost my personality. I had lost who I was. So, and I'm expecting her to understand it, and she don't. And on top of that, the transition didn't go like I thought it would go. And all of a sudden, all the money I saved, because I put in some bad real estate deals and just had to start back over. So, yeah, yeah, it was tough.
Was did that cause a little bit of depression even? Would you
Mm-mm.
go that far? Or just a
I,
little anxiety or just a little embarrassment?
well, yeah, anytime
What
you
about the
lose,
shame?
right,
Yeah.
anytime you lose your money, you're embarrassed, right? But as I've gotten older, I realized Lehman Brothers went bankrupt in 72 hours. And those are the best financial minds, quote unquote, in the world.
Wow. What a great
S-
example.
so you say, well, as a young athlete with all of this cash with no guidance, yeah, that's a recipe for a disaster, right? So it didn't necessarily put me into depression. Yeah, it was anxiety because I'm like, I gotta provide for my family, and like I don't have any transferable skills now, right? So yeah, it was anxiety. Or you're constantly applying for jobs and nobody's hiring you. You're like, wait, like all my life is like the amount of work you put in is instantly rewarded with an output, right? So
Yeah.
if I go to the gym and I lift, 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 I'm getting stronger. So it was some anxiety. I've never gotten to the depression stage, but I think I was really angry for a long time and didn't know it, right? My wife,
That affected your marriage.
it did, but there's a couple things my wife and I always agree on. We never argue over finances. Never have we had the one argument we had, Leslie, for
Hmm.
like that would say finances. When I was drafted, I got a little bitty signing bonus, right? And my wife was at the time pregnant with our son, and she had a little like Chevy Cavalier. And I said, I want to get you a Chevy Envoy. That was the car at the time. Buy
Hmm.
cash. And I'm on the phone with her, right? I said, I'm going to get you this car because you're the mother of my child. I need to take this before we were married. She says, I don't need a car. My car is fine. I'm like, no, you need a car. No, my car is fine. No, you need to get a car. I don't need a car. So I was just so pissed off, but that was the closest we've had to arguing over
Yeah.
finances. When
Yeah.
she didn't want a
That's a
car, I couldn't
blessing.
get to her. Yeah.
That's
So
a
we never had,
blessing
yeah,
because that's the number one cause of divorce in America. We
right.
know that is finances. But we also know it's the number one cause of a lot of the groupie women that these NFL players marry hitting the
Yeah.
exits.
Yeah. Yeah. So you need to understand. So my wife has been with me through thick and as thin can get, so and vice versa. So you just have to know and realize and respect who you're going. I had a buddy who, he was complaining about the mother of his child, and he said, well, where'd you meet her? In the club. Well, what's the complaint? She's always in the club. But, you
I
know,
know as they say, I know he didn't. I
he's
know he
like,
did.
yeah, so
So he
it's like,
found her in the club and he was mad. She's always in the club, never giving me
exactly,
what I need because she always want to go out.
exactly. So you get what
I
you
am
what you put out
curious.
there.
Did he listen? Or what was he
Uh,
receptive?
well, they weren't together, so he's just like, oh, okay, so he still dates multiple women, but it is what it is, But for me, I've always been just simple,
Yeah.
Just normal guy and whatnot. But yeah, like I said, I talk about my wife, but she's a, like I said, she's a good lady. She's a good lady.
Harold, you are one on the good team. And I appreciate you for that. And I appreciate you not running from it either. Like you're
Right.
standing your ground. Like, listen, I fell in love. Listen, I had a baby and I was missing I wanted to be there. I was wanting to be responsible. Do you, I hope you hear this echo
Hmm.
that's happening from that.
Hmm.
That you have so many guys that just want to run the streets, want to be a thug, want to ball out, want to do this. And here you are, you saying, you know what, I made it. But even when I got there, sometimes it matters to just do the right thing and be a good guy.
Hmm.
And it's refreshing. And
Hmm.
and, and regardless, it's a no judgment zone going to ever come from me because I'm certainly going to have future guests on the show who are going to have a total different conversation with me.
Right.
How, they just was all about, living the life, balling
Right.
out, living above their means. And thank you for bringing that balance.
Hmm.
Thank you for bringing that balance and giving kids right now the the idea that what I don't have to wow. I don't have I can just continue to do, educate myself, finish school, dream to have my own
Right.
company,
Right.
and still fulfill my dreams
Right.
and still be a good guy. What's wrong with that? And you're
Right.
showing everybody there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And
Right.
that's exactly why I'm so grateful that you came today. Because when I tell you, there are some people who are just, they took some much sharper turns than
Hmm.
this.
Hmm.
But what you're saying, there are going to be some kids and just even, men and women who are adults, and it's not even, in sports, but they decide, you know what, man, that's a solid guy who
Hmm.
just loved his family. And you
Right.
know what? That I need to do better. I need to do
Hmm.
more in that area. So let's end with this. Let's talk about you have how many kids do you have?
One.
You have the one.
Yep.
Still.
Yeah, there's one. That's it. There's one.
I know. How he or she? What did you tell
he.
me?
He.
He.
Yep.
How old is he now?
He's 21.
21.
Yeah, he's 21.
And as my late grandmother would say, I know he ain't no good. And only child.
He- he's the only child. He's at
See,
University of Illinois. So
see there. And you know what? And I love that because a lot of times we say, you're going to ruin your kids. You love them too hard. You're going to tear. Oh, no. He had lots of love. He had a father who chose him.
hmm.
What greater gift that he could ever have is to hear his father say live, I
Hmm.
chose you. And
Hmm.
I'm all right with that. I have no regrets.
Right.
So he's 21. He's at Illinois and grounded because that's what
Hmm.
you and your wife have obviously given him a great foundation.
Hmm.
So you've had this great life experience. What advice do you give him about
No,
his
we
future?
right. He's gonna be an entrepreneur. I see it. He's already doing it. Like he makes his own money to pay for his rent and whatnot. We pay his tuition, but he pays his own rent. He's not worked a job in his life, but he does production, and I guess he has a pretty popular name, and he makes money from social media and all of that stuff. But
Okay.
what we tell him is be authentic. Don't ever be what you think somebody wants you to be. And that's the advice his mom gives him, and I give him: be authentic, even if it's counter to the masses. And that's the story of my life. Like,
Yeah.
as we talk, people say, dude, like you don't do any of that. You don't do, or your thought process is XYZ, but I'm just authentically me. And at
Yeah.
the end of the day, when you lay your head down on your pillow, you want to have no regrets. So that's the advice we give him. Just really be yourself. Don't ever pretend to be something that you're not.
That's right. That's
Hmm.
right. Well, Harold, God bless you, sir. You are the perfect gentleman. You've been the perfect guest. There's definitely going to have to eventually be a part two.
Right.
At some point, I've got to bring you in and just sit on the couch with me, and let's
Right.
interview. Let's bring some balance. Let's Snoop Martha some people. Let's Snoop Martha some people. Let's
Right.
get a
Right.
balanced approach. Let's bring in some WNBA players, and we got the NFL guy with his thoughts and opinion, and bringing some NFL guys who might share exact opposite story from you, and you connect with him like I've connected with you today. But I
Right.
would love to have that. So that's an invitation that you and I continue to partner with Hush No More. I will end with this about Hush No More. Of
Hmm.
course, what I set out to do today, I'm feeling really great that it was
Right.
achieved,
Right.
because Hush No More is truly all about bringing out all the dynamics of what goes on in sports and what
Hmm.
happens in our aftermath, the difficulties, sometimes even greater success. Like, I want to just bring it out because so many people just glorify sports, they
Right.
glorify athletes. They think that we've never had an issue, a problem in our lives
Right.
until you come on and you say, you know what? Even when you get there, it's good, and I'm grateful.